Everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to STEMatrix Learn Empower Network, and thank you for joining us today. I'll be one of your MCs. I'm Vera, and I'll be MCing alongside Sandy.
Hi, I'm Sandy.
We are partnered with the Society of Women Engineers, and we will be introducing 4 speakers today. Ms Sheryl Tan, Dr Vina Doshi, Ms Shurti Sohaney, and Ms Christina Tan. So if you have any questions during the discussion, please put them in the Zoom chat, and then we will have a session later to answer these questions. Shall I start?
Yes.
So first, I would like to ask the speakers to please give a brief introduction of yourself and your background. So Ms. Sheryl, would you like to go first?
All right. Thank you for having me here today. Hi, everyone. So I'm Sheryl, and I'm currently in my 3rd year of medicine at NUS Yong Lin School of Medicine. Yeah. A brief introduction of myself. Maybe I'll just throw in one of my favorite words, and I think it's quite applicable for today's session. And my favorite word would be understanding and really setting priorities, and understanding of like myself, understanding the people, and understanding why we are in this field. Yeah. So that's a little intro about me and my favorite word. As for my background, I think what would you like to know about my background actually? It's a bit of a broad question here.
It can be a bit like where you studied in secondary school,
Okay.
what your passions are.
Sure. Okay, so I actually studied at SCGS, and then I came over to ACS International before I joined the NUS. And yeah, and I have a lot of passions indeed. So one would be my passion for teaching. Another would be my interest in sports actually. Yeah, and perhaps maybe my environment that I've been exposed to have a very fair share of influence from my own like family story, and having the opportunity to actually meet a diverse group of individuals. I really got to see the different school of thoughts and how life is viewed like, and that's how actually all these experiences made me choose to study medicine today.
Thank you, Sheryl. That was really interesting. I think diversity is very important as well. Ms. Christina Tan, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. So hi everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Christina. I'm actually thinking I'm pulling out the average age here. I'm married with 2 kids, right? They are 6 and 7. So I studied chemical engineering at NUS like more than a decade ago. After graduating, I joined one company and stayed with that company for the last 13 years. So that's ExxonMobil. So I started off my career in a sales function, but I had the opportunity to actually try out quite a wide range of different domains within the company itself. So I had experience in like hardcore engineering, working in the manufacturing plant in Singapore. I also experience in supply chain as well. And currently, I'm holding a position of the senior optimizer. I think people may not be familiar with that term itself, but what I really do is to develop short and mid-term strategy around the feedstock and products that we bring into the plant and then sell at the Singapore manufacturing site. Yeah, so that's about me and my background.
Thank you, Ms. Christina. How fascinating. How about you, Dr. Vina?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here. It's the first time I'm on a panel such as this, so I think it's going to be a bit of an eye-opener for me as well. But basically, I'm a medical doctor. I'm actually a geriatrician. So I look after elderly. Most of my patients are above 65. I think out of those, majority will be 80 and above. So my oldest one I've ever looked after all these years is 107. So I did my medical school in UK. And the reason why I had to go there was because I didn't get into NUS because at that time there was a quota system for males and females. So I think that's a very appropriate kind of background for me to have to be on this panel, I guess. Yeah, in terms of passion and all that, other than something that's related to work, I actually do enjoy other things like reading. When I was in UK, we used to go trekking quite a bit. And currently it's just simply baking. A nice, good stress reliever. Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Vina. I really like baking too, actually. And finally, Shruti.
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Shruti. I'm a 20-year-old girl from India and I've been living in Malaysia ever since I started school. So I'm currently a final year student at Sunway University studying information systems, major in data analytics. So just a little background of what my degree is about. So information systems is where we focus on the strategic use of technology to support business processes and decision making. One of the ways we could do that is through data analytics. And data analytics is basically the process of where we examine data sets to draw conclusions and about about the data itself. So that's what my degree is kind of about. So passing over to Vera.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next question. Sandy?
So, could you guys describe your educational pathway and what led you to select the STEM field that you're currently in? Like, when did you recognize your passions or your interests and then decide, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, basically? Could we start off with Miss Christina Tan, please?
Yeah, sure. So, like I started earlier on, I guess I'm a little bit older than some of you. So during my time, there isn't actually a lot of the pathway that you can select. I mean, today you have like the IB program and then so many. I mean, I haven't even caught up with time, what are the possibilities from an education standpoint that you can select. So I had a pretty much cookie cutter educational pathway, right? I did triple science for O levels, went on to do my A's, double science and econs and mathematics. And then it came to the decision on, okay, what do I exactly study in a uni? It's very nice to hear from like Dr. Doshi, as well as Sheryl, having passion and in their field. Actually, honestly, for myself, when it came to that decision, okay, what exactly I want to study, I like to say I kept it simple and effective. I kind of just, okay, I'm afraid of blood. I can't choose like medical field. I'm pretty decent in math and science. So I thought, okay, engineering seems to make a lot of sense. And, but there are a lot of engineering fields and I like chemicals. So I'm like chemistry. So I said, okay, then maybe chemical engineering. So there I ended up at. Um, uh, but so I wish I had really strong passion and know exactly what I wanted at that point in time. But I think it is actually normal and perfectly okay to not, be exactly certain of what you want at that young age itself. Um, yeah, and the most important thing I feel is that to understand that change is constant. And it's important to be flexible and adaptable. So, when you make a life decision, I mean, it's not literally a life decision. You can always, pivot away and change along the way as you grow to understand yourself better, right? So, yeah. So I decided to study that, and as I mentioned about my career earlier on, I'm not doing like hardcore engineering, but whatever I learned in school is very much applicable even in the job that I do today, where I work more closely with the commercial folks. I do interact with the manufacturing folks as well, and the engineering skills that I had acquired from school and also in a couple of years in that I did in the manufacturing side does help me in terms of my job better. So yeah.
Wow, that was very insightful. Thank you so much. Could we have Dr. Vina next?
So, I mean, basically, in terms of schooling and all that, I went to the neighborhood Anglican school, which was St. Hilda's, which is now one of the top schools in Singapore. But at that time, I think we were a little small school with just three classes per level, that kind of thing. We had a lot of fun playing hopscotch, chapte, whatever, in the school compound. So it was a very nice, simple initial schooling. But it was during, I think, my secondary years. My father is an avid collector of the old Reader's Digest collection where you used to get monthly, little A5 size booklets with lots of inspirational stories and stuff. So I think I was reading those and also all the other books that my dad used to collect that I realized I actually wanted to do medicine. But I think as Christina said, that the only constant thing is actually change. So even though I knew I wanted to do medicine, if I look at the course I've taken, right through A levels and then eventually to medical school, and then now with the final career choice, it has changed multiple times. So even within medicine, I initially wanted to do neonates. Then at some point in time, it became cardiology. And then I did geriatrics accidentally. So I'm an accidental geriatrician because my best friend was doing a 6-month attachment. And she said, hey, it's good, come, you'll be able to study for your exams, blah, blah, blah. But of course, when I went in there, I had no time to study. I was very, very busy. But then I realized that that's what medicine is, to be able to provide holistic care. And for me to become an organ-based specialist, whether it's a cardiologist or a gastroenterologist, was probably not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to provide holistic care to the patient. So that's why I ended up doing geriatrics. I would also like to echo what Christina says, that sometimes you may pick up on a certain field in terms of your professional qualifications, but eventually it's the skill set that you pick up that may actually ride you through no matter what job you are in. So like, for example, and I'm not saying this because Christina's an engineer, but I'm bringing it up because she's here today. But I have always found that my patients' caregivers, because I do a lot of home care, so my patients' caregivers, the ones who are engineers and accountants, actually do very, very precise caregiving for the patients. Maybe the accountants are a little bit too much. They really like to add up all the numbers. But like my brother is an engineer, and I find they just have this very analytical, very practical approach to which they can apply to anything. And I think that's what's important, is picking up those kind of skills, which can then stand you in good state. And it may even be a career change later, but the skills you pick up, no matter what your initial path is, I think that's what's important. And I think now, like in medicine, you have Duke's NUS, which I think, if I'm not wrong, caters to second career professionals who want to change careers, right? So I think that's actually a very good facility to be able to have. And I've also found that the few people whom I've interacted who've been through Duke's, because they're older, they're a bit mature, and they've done some other career before, they have a very interesting, very different perspective to how they approach their work in their life. So I think that's quite good as well. Yeah, don't be afraid of career change, even if you need to. Yeah.
Wow, that's a really interesting journey. Thank you for talking about the ups and downs and like the over-encompassing importance of the skill set and the changes. Yeah. Could we have Shurti next?
Okay, so for me, I've always been a science student since my Cambridge IGCSE, and then for my pre-university studies, I took Cambridge A levels, where I did physics, chem, maths, and further maths. So I was particularly very interested in the mathematics field or in the tech field, and data analytics caught my eye. When there are also other options like industrial stats or actuarial studies or computer science, I just realized that pure science subjects did not really captivate my full attention or interest. So just like how Christina mentioned that she cannot see blood, yeah, same goes to me. I really can't as well. So so what I liked from my science subjects was doing the practical experiments where I had to collect data, had to analyze, and then I had to derive conclusions. And this is very similar to what I do in my degree, data analytics. So in majority of my assignments, I basically just crunch data into meaningful insights to recommend strategies to organizations that we study on. It's the same concept that I do in every single assignment, but it's just a different intensity and also a different approach or a technique that we use. So for data analytics, with new data comes a new challenge, because then I have to evaluate the business side of the scenario to properly manipulate the data and extract meaningful insights. So far, I actually like my degree. Yeah, that's all.
Okay, thank you. I never really thought about that, like the application version of it. Could we have Miss Sheryl next?
Yeah, I think I really like the responses from all the speakers, and I think I echo whatever all of them said. And currently, actually, I'm working with data analytics and nursing students actually do projects together. So I really like the idea that how medicine is so interconnected. There's so many intersectional that we can do with it. For myself, selecting medicine was definitely not an overnight choice. I actually applied 1 week before the closing date. So definitely shouldn't be shouldn't be an overnight choice. And I think my perspective towards education really led me to where I am today. And I think for a lot of people, a lot of the participants here, the sole focus of education for me shouldn't be getting like stellar grades from my perspective. And rather it's like really the mindset to find meaning, find beauty in the different subjects that you do. And that's what I did for myself. And I think the willingness to really understand, the content that the teacher teaches, and give it all in assignments or tasks that we are assigned to. And I think it really links back to my favorite word of understanding. Yeah. I think my reason for saying the above is that it's only when you give, your all that you can really discover which subjects really pick your interest and which one, which one really scares you or which one you don't really like and things like that. And I think, actually, even if when I did all those, I actually really liked human geography. And I didn't have Reader's Digest, but my mom had like a whole bookstore of National Geographic books. So I would just read them while growing up. So I think that's why I like human geog. And also like biology, and especially the impact that it has not only for the person, but the people around the person as well. And so when it came to that point, in IB, my second year, I was torn between whether should I go towards more the geography side or should I take a biology course? And then biology have so many other things as well. And so I really sat down and thought to myself whether I can see myself doing this in, the future, in like 20, 30 years down the road, and really what the potential paths this degree has. I think for myself, I see medicine as a window to many, many doors. For instance, if I want to teach, I can do that in medicine. If I want to do research, I can do that as well. If I want to, do research with other faculties, I can do that as well. And that's how I landed myself in medicine after a lot of dilemma. And to really answer those two questions, Googling will only get you this far, 40% of your answers, you may get it from Googling, but the other 60%, I wanted to gather these answers based on my experience or like really talking to people in that field. So I urge everyone to, if you guys are in the same dilemma as me, to go experience, go and talk, go find opportunities for yourself. And after all, I saw medicine really ticking 80% of my boxes. And that's why I'm here now today.
Thank you so much. I think Vera has the next question prepared.
So now delving further into career pathways, just like Sheryl said earlier, that students are often not really exposed to their true environments until they enter the workforce. Could you guys discuss more specifically about your experiences studying or working in a STEM field, both the good and the bad aspects? And if you're comfortable, maybe talking more about your struggles particularly as a woman in this field. So Dr. Vina, would you like to start us off?
Okay, so I mean, in terms of because I did my basic degree in the United Kingdom, I think I had a slightly different experience, I guess, to locally, because I think now things are very different, but at that time, and I think I'm even more ancient than Christina is. So at that time, we really I think in Singapore, didn't really focus on the human aspect. I think in any course, any field, you have a human aspect. And I think more so in medicine. And I think in NUS at that time, it was very focused on facts, and things like that. Whereas what I experienced when I was in UK was a very human approach to medicine, which I think gelled in well with my own idea of what medicine should be, etc., etc. I think the challenges for me initially came starting from the family itself, because I was the first person in that 3 generations to have actually gone away And being a girl, obviously the grandparents were not comfortable. But thankfully, my parents, stood by the decision and said, look, she tried locally, she couldn't get in, and this is what she wants to do. So we just sent her. I was lucky I had family there, but of course I wasn't living with them. So my experience coming, from a Western country, I think was very different in that sense that during medical school itself, I don't recall any incidences where I faced issues because I'm female, right? I think the issue actually was here when I tried to go for an interview, and at that time they had a bit of a quota system as to the number of females and males that were going into which courses, that kind of thing. So I think that's where I sort of got stuck. So actually I didn't experience that while I was there. And even during the working times, because down, Caucasians from way before have always been more open earlier than us. So I didn't experience that there. When I came back home, I spent 6 years in the UK and then I came back. There may have been some subtle, I think, issues with being female, but nothing overt, I must say. I think that was the good thing. There was nothing overt. I think because by that time in medicine, I mean, there were already so many females who had broken the boundaries and stuff by then already, right? I think maybe females in professions which were less or rather females were not so seen, not so visible. I think maybe even engineering, maybe even people who are doing informatics and data analysis and all that. I think most people think only boys can do number crunching and work with computers and stuff like that, right? I think those fields may have experienced more at that time than in medicine. Now, if you ask me, currently, do I face any issues? I think now the issue I face actually comes from me myself rather than from externally. And that's because part of my work, because I do home care, I actually, when you go to patients' homes, you actually literally break a boundary the minute you step into their homes, the minute you step into their bedroom, you already broken boundaries. So the problem is that, let's say for night calls, my patients, if they call at night, now this is something that as a safety issue and all that, I actually don't do my night calls. And I actually have another standby colleague who fills in for me during the night calls. And this is basically coming from a practical point of view that, number one, I'm tired, I can't go out. Number two, I think seeing where some of my patients live, some of them, in the private housing can be in the middle of nowhere, in terms of safety. So that's something, I'm not sure whether it's just something I perceive myself, but when I do mention this to my patients and their families, their immediate reaction is, oh yes, of course. So whether that's again in itself, a sexist sort of comment, I don't know, but they actually understanding and they say, oh yeah, you shouldn't be wandering around at night. So you can see some of those ideas are still there. And is it because society at large is still thinking that way, or is it just we ourselves still haven't got this out from our system? That bit I'm not sure. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Dr. Vina. Thankfully, today the STEM field continues to become more diverse and accepting. Shirti, how about you?
Yeah, I guess I was called. Okay. Okay, so for me, so like I mentioned earlier, there's a variety of data analytics techniques, right? So there's a lot of programming language that we learn. So for me, since the very first semester, every semester I had to learn a new programming language, and not one, but like 2, 3 at once. So it was very overwhelming for me because I'm not very good in coding, and I don't really enjoy coding as much as I enjoy non-code applications. So the good thing is that I got to learn a lot of different techniques, a lot of programming language, but at the same time, it was very difficult to cope up with it because obviously it's a growing technology field. And it's also good that I like today, like now I'm a final year student, right? So today I know which technique I like and which domain I have my interest in, so I can pursue that in the future. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you for sharing your journey. It must not have been easy to adjust to that. Miss Cheryl, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. I really enjoyed listening to Dr. Vina, and I think one thing that I'm currently actually doing in medicine is tapping on the human aspect, because I feel as much as it's like in the curriculum, but it's still not the top priority in our NUS curriculum, so to speak. So I think some experiences that really are the highlights of 3 years in medical school. On the top of my list would be starting my own local community involvement project. So it's called Popping the Bubble. And what we do is that we understand different communities, the marginalized communities in Singapore, that we left often see before really diving in and giving goods or like serving them. And another thing would be myself. I think I mentioned earlier that I really like sports. So I actually started medicine and nursing combined. So we get to actually meet our future colleagues, netball interest group. And on that note, I'm really appreciative for the flexibility and the support that the school gives to us. And for me to really embark on like these sidelines that we feel strongly for. So apart from those two that I started, there's actually a lot of directorates in medicines, and one of them would be the academic directorate. So I think I'm very happy to actually found this directorate called EduTeam. So what we do is it's really student-led, and I think on that note of women and gender inequality, actually I realized that even now serving EduTeam, I'm the only female in the community. So the rest are all guys. It's quite sad, but I think it's reality. I'm not sure why, but that's the case. So for EduTeam, what I do is we really create case-based studies, and we help our peers as our juniors who are struggling or they just want extra guidance in medicine. So I do cases and we run through the professors and we teach. So it's quite a small group discussion, teaching style, and we all have fun and learn together. Yeah, so that's one of the very good experiences I have. Yeah, I think one thing that the bad aspects, I wouldn't use the vocab bad to encompass the encounter experience. But I think one of them that struck me was, when I go for clinical rotations in hospitals or even in clinics, there's definitely experiences where I feel that, hey, the doctor-patient interaction could be better. I wouldn't say that's a bad experience, but rather it allows me to reflect and reminds myself not to really replicate those actions or words. Yeah, I think that would be it for me.
That's really incredible. I love and admire that you strive to help those around you, not only your patients, but the people who are learning alongside you. Being the only woman in such a team is also very, very admirable.
It is. Need to exert somehow.
Miss Christina, what about you?
Okay, so I'll run it off. So for me, I'll talk a little bit more about my career because education is quite a long time ago. From a career standpoint, I would say the good aspect is that there's never a boring day. There are a lot of problems to solve, and sometimes when you think you optimize it and you solve it perfectly, the macro environment is always changing, and then the next day, okay, maybe that's not the optimized solution, and you keep trying to find out what's the best way to kind of maximize the profitability for the corporation. And I think one additional challenge is that sometimes when we come up with ideas as well, it has to be sustainable, right? You can come up with 1,000,001 ideas, but if that's going to cost you an arm and a leg, then it's not going to be sustainable. It's not going to be something practical to implement. So that's what engineers do, right? You try to come up with something that's fit for purpose, and I like that challenge. It comes along with the STEM field. And then I also wouldn't term it a bad aspect. I think Dr. kind of mentioned it a little bit on that female-male. I wouldn't call it discrimination. I think in my company they're pretty progressive. In fact, they have a lot of mentorship regards to the female employees in the company itself. So I'm grateful for that. Yeah, so naturally in the engineering field there are more males than females, and you got to be comfortable in your own skin in that aspect. And I think one thing that that people may not realize, sometimes even when they're progressive, sometimes they have unconscious biasness whereby they try to overtake care a female colleague, right? So I have two examples. I was a project engineer previously, and what a project engineer do, basically I worked with contractor companies to modify the manufacturing plant, so they actually have cranes and stuff, and then they try to modify the plant itself. And because most of them are guys, right? So my colleague would be like, okay, do you want me to, talk to them instead of yourself? I'm like, hey, what do you think? I'm not able to do it, right? So there's that unconscious bias. And then once when I got pregnant, and then my boss started to take away some work from me. And I'm like, hey, what are you doing then? Like, doesn't mean I'm pregnant, I can't work, right? I mean, like, but he was trying to show care and concern, right? And say, hey, maybe you need a little bit more time to rest, and we can get someone else to help you out. But I think it's important to have that dialogue because everyone's pregnancy or family challenges are different, right? So it's important to have that dialogue with your supervisor, your manager, and help them to understand what you can do, what you cannot do. And when you see things being taken away from you, it's important to demand for the ball back, right? Don't just let it happen. Yeah, so I think that's one thing that maybe in the STEM field, because by virtue there are more males, it could come up occasionally. Yes.
The dynamic nature of your career must be really both exciting and chaotic. I also agree that's often the case where gender bias is unconscious and not really led by ill intent. So it is important to have these types of discussions. Now moving on to the next question.
Okay, so this is our second last question. Since we have so many students present here today, we were wondering if you have any advice, especially for the young women here today. Would you encourage them to go and venture into your particular STEM fields? We would love to hear about that. So could we start with Shurti?
Yep. I think definitely I will recommend you guys to venture into data analytics or even data science. If you have like problem solving skills, if you enjoy daily challenges, if you love learning new things every day, then you'll definitely find your interest in data analytics. And if you love coding, then data science is for you. Yeah, that's it.
I think that was really precise. Thank you. Could we get Ms. Sheryl next?
Yeah, sure. Definitely. If I'm pretty sure everyone here in this talk wants to venture into STEM field, that's why you're here, right? So if you are thinking of that, then yeah, you should pursue it. I think STEM encompasses like really many degrees, like from medicine to computer science, mathematics, engineering, and really this field it's ever evolving. And I think I like the phrase "the crest of the wave," because holding a STEM degree it's really you're being on the crest of the wave. There's so many ideas, new developments that you can potentially make an impact on, and be it like greener energy or sustainable living, the convenience and efficiency. And I think one thing that I'm currently working on is researching on tumor markers, for instance, for neuroblastoma, which is basically cancers of your early nerve cells. I don't know how to put it in simple terms, but yeah, it's a cancer of your sympathetic nervous system. So this is one way that like we can make changes in the STEM field. And for those that are considering medicine, I think one thing to really note is you must know yourself whether it's not really just are you afraid of blood or not, but the workload can be quite demanding, especially in the clinical years. It means the third year to fifth year of medical school, where you have to juggle talking to patients, being there for patients, as well as juggling your academics, because there's a lot of content you need to be familiar with and be good at as well. So there's a lot of aspects, and I think if you guys want to ask more questions, I'm more than happy to answer them later on. Yeah.
I agree. I think STEM is really versatile and it's constantly growing. It's kind of that field where there's always room for improvement. And I would say thank you for the advice on the workload. I'm sure many were curious about that, myself included. Can we have Miss Christina next?
Okay, sure. So I started off earlier saying that, I wasn't really sure where my passion is. So my advice would be actually starting off somewhere where you are pretty good at. It's not too bad an idea if you don't have like a strong calling or passion where you want to be. Because at least, when you're doing something that you are pretty decent at, you build up your confidence. And then as you kind of learn more about yourself and what's there out there, then you can always pivot later down the road. Yeah, so that's all I had for Ms. Simple.
I think something you're naturally inclined to is definitely also important. Could we have Dr. Vina last?
So, I mean, I would agree with, what the other three speakers have mentioned, in the sense that I think it's basically a trade-off, or if it's both there, it would be good. It's either something that you're so passionate about that you really, really want to do it and you just go for it, whether it's a STEM field or not, right? It's just you are really, truly interested in doing one of these things. The second thing is maybe, you don't know exactly which is your strongest passion, or maybe you have 2, 3 different passions and you're not sure which is the one you should pursue. Then go on a practical route, right? Look at what you are good at doing, and that will be really the best of both worlds, because then you have good passion plus you are skilled at what you're doing, and that will probably stand you in good state no matter what career choice you make, really. I think the thing about the STEM fields is that they have the added challenge of making your mark, right, in that kind of a field. Which again, if you're good at what you're doing and you're passionate about it, and you're ready to ride the waves as they come, then there should be no issue, and it might even be a very fulfilling, exciting part of your life.
I think finding the balance between passion and skill set is
Yep.
very practical and valuable for the long term, but also being prepared for everything, like you said, is just one of the biggest parts of it.
Yeah.
So for the last question, Farah.
As for the last question, in your opinion, what was the most beneficial resource or experience to you during your journey? Ms. Cheryl, can you start us off?
Okay, sure. I would say something a bit less relevant. I don't know whether it's very relevant, but I think I really like podcasts. And since JC, or even like Sec 4, I think around there, I've been listening to podcasts until today. And I think podcast is one way. There's so many genres out there. But for myself, I really like the ones on communication and philosophy. And I think it really helps me grow and expand my mind, especially in, studying 3 years of medicine and facing medical knowledge every day. It's something new and interesting to just refresh yourself, relax yourself. And I think one thing it helps me is become a better listener as well. And yeah, I think it really gives me good insights, valuable insights that I really encourage all of you to pick it up if you haven't ventured into it. I think another beneficial resource, or rather experience, would be knowing and treasuring your hobbies a lot and keep them with you. I think Dr. Vina mentioned that she likes baking and she still bakes till today. And I think that's really good, So one thing that I really like is netball, or like bouldering and all these sports. And I think number one is like teamwork, working with people. And in the medicine field, medical field, we actually work with a lot of people, the nurses, the OTs, the PTs, and definitely knowing how to communicate and navigate to that is very important. And yeah, I think that's really 2 things that I always hold very close to my heart, even in the futures down the road.
That's really interesting. I didn't expect podcasts to have like to promote that open-mindedness and communication. Miss Christina, would you like to go?
Okay, yeah, I like the part that Cheryl mentioned about communicating and talking to people. I think that's very, very important. How I see it, it's like forming mentorships, forming allyships at the workplace itself, right? Talking to just people. People is a very valuable resource, right? You can get so much insights, different perspectives when you talk to different people. And when I have certain ideas, I go around and bounce off the ideas from people, and through their insights, I can further refine my ideas, and it's also getting buy-ins from people, right? And my workplace, there are a lot of different stakeholders involved in making a decision, right? In the whole supply chain of trying to sell a product, or rather the whole value chain of trying to sell a product, there is the people that's making the product, it's people that's trying to transport the product, then there's people trying to sell out in the market, and you want to make it all work and be efficient. You need to convince everyone what's the best way to do it. And that's getting their buy-in. And to do that, you need to talk to them, right? Not wait until the last presentation and you go to them, and when people are surprised by new ideas, it may take time, right? So talking to people, getting their perspective, getting their buy-in is extremely helpful. I would say as a valuable resource that people should leverage on. Mentorship is also important, right? As a young, engineer or whatever field that you guys are in or planning to go into, when you have someone that has a little bit more experience, right, to who you can talk to, and listen from your perspective, I think that helps as well. In my company, because we're a global company, when some of the vice presidents that come from the US, I mean, we're a US based company, they come to Singapore. I do proactively make the time and effort to have a chat with them, just to understand, because the perspective in the US or other parts of the world can be different in Singapore as well. And when you talk to them, you gain more insights. So to summarize, is people, right? People is my biggest, most invaluable resource.
Networking is actually one of our goals for today's discussion, and we definitely agree that communication at all levels is one of the most important things in every workforce, and not only STEM. So thank you. Dr. Vina, what about you?
So actually on similar trends, I don't know whether just is a coincidence or whether it just reflects the certain kind of mindsets which go into different careers. So actually exactly what Cheryl said, except my resource is not podcasts, obviously, but more in terms of reading material from books and things like that. I think one of the biggest sort of positive influences this has all made is actually helping me to make my practice and how I care for my patients and the journey I lead them down a much better one. So for example, because when we do home care, we see many patients who are at the end of life, and people, last time it used to be such a taboo thing to talk about, how do you want to die? But now it's something we must talk about. And I think having seen all my patients who have had troubled journeys towards the end, it just made it even more important for the future patients that I help to let them see that in order to have a good end, they have to start having a good life now. So that's a bit of a change. I think many fields in medicine are already moving towards that, in the sense that you want to have a good death, you have to have a good life. But that's a bit of the morbid perspective of it. But if you look at it, it actually means that there are positive effects on the person's journey, actually. So similarly, I think in terms of people, while we communicate and we get information from people, something I've always told my staff, I've always told my students, is that remember that the patients are actually our best teachers. That no matter what the books say, it's the patient that who is going to teach you the most. And I think that's one of for anyone in medicine, I think that would be the sort of final say I would want to say lah. Yeah.
I completely agree with you.
Thank you, Dr. Vina, for sharing. Shruti, would you like to finish us off?
Okay, so I have four ways. So the first would be I attend talks organized in my university, where I get to learn from the leaders in the data analytics field of like what does their daily life looks like, what do they do, the applications, and how we as students could fit in their company, and how do we want to enhance our data and analyst profiles if we wish to apply. You can also attend like workshops on learning new data analysis techniques. I even talked to my senior friends who have gone through internships to understand how the working style is in each company, because like I mentioned earlier, like there's like a variety of data analysis techniques, right? So every friend of mine, they use like a different technique in their company, and it's every company have their own unique way of dealing with data. So from that, I learned if I wish to apply to that company, I know which technique I should follow on, focus on, and improve on that. And then I think the last one is also learning online. So like I mentioned earlier as well, I'm not really good in coding. So to get better in coding, I did like a few online courses, and I also worked on some side projects so I could enhance my resume and also get better in my coding skills. So if you guys are interested in data analysis field, you can also take up like short online courses. It's there's a lot of courses you can do online. You can try it out and actually confirm your interest before actually committing yourselves to a full 3-year degree in data analytics.
Thank you so much for sharing your resources. Actually, those are very interesting. Thank you. So overall, thank you everyone so much for your insightful and detailed responses. I'm sure many of us are grateful to have had this opportunity to hear from you. So now we have received a few questions throughout the discussion. So whoever would like to answer, you can feel free to just answer as you please. Our other member, Krish, she'll be leading the Q&A discussion. So Krish?
Yeah, so thank you, Vera. Thank you, Sandy, for leading the talks and the questions. So we've got quite a few questions from both the Zoom call and from our forum earlier. So we'll start off with the questions we have on the Zoom call. So firstly, we have, with the advancement of AI, do you feel that there is a threat to your career pathway in the coming 5-10 years, perhaps?
I can do a quick answer to that. I don't think so. I think it's complementary, right? I think with AI, we get to do work more efficiently and effectively, and people would then focus on more higher value added work, right? So, because at the end of the day, I feel that as people, you still want that personal touch. I mean, if you look back during the COVID pandemic period, it is quite miserable, like, just talking to your computer screen. We all try to work over Zoom, but it's just different. I mean, we were so happy, or at least myself, I was really happy when I got to go back to the workplace and be able to interact with my colleagues, work with them face to face. My husband had a job change during the COVID pandemic, and he said it was miserable, right? Because you're trying to adapt to a new environment, but you're doing everything via Zoom itself. And another element I had was, so I in one of my previous role, I had to interact with colleagues in the US and Europe, and when you kind of do it over emails and Zoom technology, it's just not effective. I felt that he wasn't giving his all and his best, in certain things that I may need help from. But after we had a face-to-face meeting, we had the opportunity to kind of get to one country, and then we had a meeting as a group itself, and things went a lot easier after that. So I felt that at the end of the day, while we have technology really helps and it makes some work more effective, but you still need people to add that human touch to it. Yeah.
No, yeah, I completely agree, because I think the pandemic was a shocker to all of us, including the corporate world and the education world. And something like STEM, it blends so perfectly with AI. So to have that people aspect and to combine it with technology, we can make magic, definitely. Any of the other speakers would like to answer this question?
Maybe I'll just add to what Christina said. Definitely the person behind that AI, behind that screen is actually important. But for me personally, I think COVID pushed technology and AI maybe a couple of years ahead, right? Because of the necessity at that point in time. But it's actually made certain things a lot easier for me, in the sense that I actually could not physically attend many of our continuing medical education talks and seminars and things, because I was always out doing house calls and things like that, so I could never attend. So now it's actually made it a lot easier, because like I can be listening to a talk while I'm driving from one point to another, and it's actually made it so much easier for me from that point of view. Secondly, in terms of AI also, I think it has done a good job in bringing us closer to our patients. I think it's a matter of how we decide to use it, rather than whether AI is just going to completely take over and become a threat. Of course, if someone decides to, like, for example, in medicine, use some app or some website online, where there's no human being at the other end, and it's just some based on some algorithms, you're getting some replies to symptoms that you're keying in. And if they choose to use that kind of platform to diagnose their medical issues and then get some form of treatment, then I think they're just putting themselves at risk. So at the end of the day, I don't think AI is going to like take over medicine. You still need that human touch at the end of that whole AI pathway.
No, yeah, I completely agree with you in that sense, because I actually have a contact with my dad's, and he's a data scientist, and he's created this technology to diagnose cancer cells using data all he's accumulated throughout his research. So yeah, definitely, I think the combination of AI and medicine will be interesting, but very beneficial in the end. Yeah. So moving on to the next question that we have on Zoom. What are some of the best STEM fields or emerging markets that you would recommend to students to explore or venture into? To any of the following topics, yeah. I'm guessing what the person meant by this question is that, like, in the coming years, like, technology is one of the biggest things. So in terms of STEM, I think like AI and artificial intelligence, and I think data science, data analytics, like Shruti is majoring right now. Something like that is a really popular field, really popular market that is emerging in the coming 5-10 years. So are you aware of some other markets or fields as such that you think maybe students would be interested in STEM?
Or maybe within your own field also, if there's like, is there an increasing demand for jobs, especially, because all of us are still just kids. So in that sense.
Maybe I can give this a try. I don't know whether they actually have university courses on it, but I mean, sustainability is a big one, right? That we're trying to go into, and my company is also trying to venture into that as well, and we certainly need talent and expertise in that area. But at the end of the day, I still say engineering forms the fundamental core, right?
Yes.
When you have that skill set, it's pretty transferable. I mean, in my company, we kind of branched out a separate, I would say, a subdivision on low carbon solutions, where we try to explore sustainable solutions, knowing looking at, the current challenges around climate change and stuff. And you'll be surprised on the number of people that we move from the existing organization to that organization, right? So it's kind of also important that we have that engineering fundamental to back us up, right? But as you move into a new emerging market, it's important to also pick up the other skills in relation to that market itself.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with you on that one. I think 2 more questions before we end this off. The first one I'd like to ask from our form, our Google form. So is there a significant difference in the way that men and women are still treated in the STEM field and STEM industries in this current day and age? Maybe even in your field, you could answer.
I think inevitably there may be some, as what Christina will put it, some bias, may not be overt discrimination or overt differences in the way males and females are treated. I also, from the practical point of view, do believe that there is some slight difference between how males and females are actually made, right? But that doesn't mean that the males and females cannot work in the same field. Of course they can. I think it's a matter of retraining. The other thing I truly believe in is what they call neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity actually basically refers to the brain's ability to literally, I guess, to put it in simple terms, rewire itself, right? To learn new skills, new tasks, etc. So I think it's very, very possible to retrain. So in terms of overt discrimination, rather than infuse per se, I think I may be not 100% accurate in this, but my own perception is that may not be field specific, but rather maybe even culture specific, or geographically there may be some issues not particularly based on a field, right? A specific STEM field. I mean, that's what I feel. Then I mean, I think that would be not something good to venture into it on this platform at this point in time. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for your answer. I completely agree with you on that one. I think before I move on, I think I interrupted Sheryl before Dr. Vina started talking. I'd like to apologize for that. Sheryl, what were you trying to say? My apologies.
Sorry, this is okay. I just wanted to add on
Yeah, please do.
That actually AI actually it's very complementary to medicine. And I think one thing that I'm not sure whether Dr. Vina or Christina mentioned, but there's actually in medicine we can actually use AI to do predictive analysis as well, and really look at the trajectories of a person's prognosis in a certain condition. And that's actually one thing that I'm currently working on with the data analysis. And yeah, so I think that's really nice. And there's a lot of future in terms of how AI can aid us and help our patients and communication between doctors and patients, especially when, in clinic settings where we have so limited time, there's a time crunch, and we want to reassure the patient that, they're in good hands and they understand what the doctor are speaking, because sometimes we go on our gibberish language of medicine and the patient sit in front of us not knowing what's happening, and that's something that I'm trying to explore as well, really getting the patients to know what they're having, using AI to help us a bit. So there's a lot of potentials, and I want to let the audience know that, that there's a lot of a lot of opportunities out there to play around with. Yeah, thanks.
Yes.
Thanks.
Now there's so much time they have as well, because they're in such early stage of their life. So they have all this time to play with these opportunities and delve into different fields. Yeah, so one more question, two more questions. One would be, what kind of difficulties did you face during medical school? And are there any tips on how to get a bigger chance to be accepted in medical school? So this is directed at Dr. Vina Doshi and Ms Sheryl Tan.
Actually, I don't know whether Sheryl would want to answer first. I mean, you are obviously a recent addition to the medical field. my experience with that would come from, I don't know how many decades ago.
At least there's no ratio now. So actually it's more female than male in medicine now, in NUS at least. Some things to prepare, rather. Okay, maybe I would just say in medicine there's actually 4 different routes. So we have the academic route that you can go through. So depending on whether you take the IB or A-levels, a cutoff, there's a certain cutoff, even though they don't state on the website. Maybe I won't disvouch this. Yeah, but other than the academic side, they look for more holistic individuals. So we can go through the leadership aspect. So if you happen to be very heavily involved in leadership roles since secondary school in your JC, IB years, then definitely that's one route you can try. The other one will be sports. Another one will be theatre and arts. And lastly, we research. So there's different avenues that you can apply now. You can apply through. Some advice, I think one thing would be, at least for myself, is get internships. I think that's the biggest thing that really helped me, rule in or rule out my decision for medicine. Because when you study and you listen, you read up, there's an idea in your head, there's a picture that what you think medicine is. But when you actually sit in the wards, even if you don't know what's happening, you have the atmosphere around you, you know how the doctors work, at least what their day in their life is like, and it will give you a better picture of whether you think it's the correct course for you. Yeah, so internships is a good opportunity.
No, it's good to get a feel of the field as well. Good to get a feel of the everyday work lifestyles and operations. The medicine field can only be like Grey's Anatomy to an extent. I'd like to say that. But last question, this one is, can you advise how one develops leadership skills to complement STEM subjects? So like you just mentioned, Sheryl, leadership's important. So either Sheryl or any other speakers, that would be great. Last question of the day.
I think leadership comes in many forms. There are a lot of different kinds of leadership, and it really how it suits your personality and type of person you are, and how to take up a leadership role. When you do it, then you learn about yourself and how you can hone the skill. I think leadership really, regardless of what kind of leadership skill, it will definitely complement in any subject, not even STEM. Any field you go to, any career choice you make, definitely leadership skills would help. Yeah, it gives you the confidence. It will teach you the responsibility to take ownership on and bear the consequences of your actions as well and your words. And I think there's also a lot of soft side to leadership that I like, in terms of, getting the people that's under you or working with you to share the same idea. And I think when it comes to leadership, for me, is having a team rather than a top-down approach. And I think I really like that kind of style of leadership. Yeah, maybe the rest can add on to my statement. Yeah.
I would like to add on. Okay, so I used to be part of my university council. So I would say majority of my leadership skills came from there, because there I met like-minded people who are very passionate, and we worked towards initiatives for the school community, which are very beneficial. And I think when we lead initiatives, we work as a team. We know how to speak. We know how to convince. So I think leadership skills can be picked up when you work with a team. So like, since you guys are students, you guys can join clubs in your school or in your council. Yeah.
I think also when you look at leadership skills, it's a continual process of learning, because obviously when you interact with different people, different situations, sometimes a skill set that you may have homed in on before may not actually be applicable, or may not be useful during that new situation. I think part of my experience when I was working in the public hospitals, how I think in every field, even in school, right, they'll be identifying who might make a good prefect. And then out of all the prefects, it's like, who might make a good head prefect, right? And as Sheryl mentioned, it all boils down to your personality. Some people are just not made to become leaders. Some people can be leaders, but up to a certain extent. They cannot be the top man there. Maybe they're better as a 2IC, because they're very good at facilitating, very good at bridging the gap between the top men and the people who are below. So I think it all depends. There are various it's a whole spectrum when you look at leadership, right? But one of the things that is important is, again, the communication skills. And if I look back at some of the courses they had in-house in the hospitals, as well as courses they sent some of us to, many of those courses were about risk management, about communicating skills, where they made us, go through literally scenarios and act out scenarios with each other, and everyone was watching, everyone was commenting, blah blah blah. It was, but some of these things have to be done, because a leader, as mentioned, top-down approach is definitely not going to be very successful for very long. Yeah.
I wanted to add on. I mean, I love all the ideas that the three ladies have expressed. Leadership, it can be earned through formal leadership, where you actually take up a certain position in clubs or whatever avenues that you are exposed to. One thing I want the group to take away, it's about influencing without authority. I mean, that's something that we try to practice a lot in my workplace. It doesn't, you don't need to actually have a formal leadership position to actually hone your leadership skills, right? And if you are, in fact, if you're able to do that without, being the captain or what, and you're able to influence others, to move towards a common objective that's in line with your objective, then I think you have done a great job, right? So to complement that, it's really about like what Dr. Vina mentioned about your communication skills, how you're able to learn to persuade people, and so continue to try that in every aspect of your life, right? Even your parents, you try to persuade them. That's also kind of like influencing without authority, or to your peers. When you're working in teams, you try to influence them. All those are all ways to try to hone your leadership skill, right?
Okay, I think that's all for today. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of this discussion. So sorry we were unable to go through all the questions. However, thank you all for coming. It was truly a pleasure to meet such STEM-sational women and host this discussion, to get to know all of you. I think many of us definitely learned a lot from you and all of your experiences. So thank you so much, and have a lovely day ahead. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.